Have you ever spent an entire hour setting up your large format camera to get a shot? My recent photography road trip to southeastern Utah provided my camera the opportunity to generously remind me that it demands that I slow down and spend quality time exercising its mechanical artistry. I invite you to come explore the slowness of large format with me through this image of House on Fire ruin. I often hear photographers who have transitioned from digital to shooting film state that they appreciate how film has forced them to slow down and be more in the moment of the photograph they are taking, choosing to concentrate more on the quality of the experience in a carefully selected scene as opposed to capturing a high quantity of images in the hopes of culling one discerning picture. Not that you couldn't slow down with a digital camera, but you have no choice when it comes to large format. This notion of slowing down in photography and being more contemplative has really been on my mind since my stop at House on Fire ruin. While photographing on location, a young man beginning his photography journey by the name of BK struck up a conversation with me regarding this thing. I mean, it's not like I can be inconspicuous with this ridiculously huge camera, right? He conveyed to me that he'd like to be more focused on just a select few images, but that the temptation of unfettered access to press the shutter on his digital camera is just too irresistible. This sentiment came after I told him that I'd been struggling for about an hour with balancing a compelling composition with the limitations of my camera setup. The combination of BK's thoughts and the imposition of slowness from my large format camera really set me down a renewed path of contemplating the advantages and disadvantages of slowing down, whether it be by choice or limitation of the medium I've consciously chosen. I typically don't go about shooting scenes with the intention that my photograph or even my collection of images have any profound meaning or insightful statement about the landscape. I just like the process of taking photographs and enjoy photographing scenes that are interesting and awesome to me. It's that simple. Pure entertainment for this guy. I shoot things that I like and that could potentially be a candidate for printing ridiculously huge to hang in my family's home. So I really shoot from a pragmatic standpoint and not a philosophical one. Yes, the images I take do remind me of the adventure I've been on, but they don't have to have a transcendent purpose, at least not for me. But this image of House on Fire ruin is personally different in that regard. Let me explain. Initially, I began thinking about this scene from a horizontal standpoint. However, I wasn't completely sold on my composition, so I changed the back to a vertical orientation. My goal was to create a vertical composition that placed a ruin on the lower third of the image, with the remainder of the scene embellishing the upper grooved rock that looked like flames and billowing smoke, for which this cliff dwelling is named after. Can you guess which lens I immediately put on my camera? The Nikon Nikkor 150mm SW lens, of course! If you haven't seen my review on this lens, I'll leave a link to that video in the description. My thought was that I could get the exaggerated perspective I was looking for from a wide-angle lens because I could get right under all the groovy flames. However, what I found was that in order to place the ruin in the lower third of the scene and incorporate more of the shelf-like ground rock was that I had to use a decent amount of front rise. Since I had the camera pointed slightly upward to bring in more of the rock grooves, I found it optically impossible to use front rise to get the vertical composition I was after because I ran out of image circle. This essentially left me with a significant black bar at the top of my image. That's just a waste of expensive Velvia 50 real estate. I can't do that. I should probably also take the time to share that another compounding problem with photographing this scene is the unevenness of the ground and varying degrees of slope in the land. So getting the composition you're after is not as simple as moving the tripod position. I did make a concerted effort at moving the camera position, but obviously it wasn't to my satisfaction because I reverted back to thinking about this scene from a horizontal perspective. My goal with this horizontal composition was to once again place the ruin in the lower third of the image and exaggerate the groovy rock at the top. This required a small amount of front rise, which thankfully fit within my image circle. I also carefully placed the direction of the rock grooves so that they fan toward the corners of my image as much as possible. That wasn't as easy as it sounds because moving the camera slightly left or right exposes rock that doesn't conform to the flame and billowing smoke look, and also removes the illusion that this cliff dwelling continues past the edges of the film. I also wanted to make sure that the curvy lines of the interesting shelf-like rocks in the foreground weren't awkwardly interrupted. I do wish that I could have adjusted the camera just slightly up to avoid interrupting the linearity of the rock at the very bottom of the scene, but then that would have just thrown off the other areas I just spent so much time carefully positioning to my satisfaction. Interestingly, when you analyze the general curves that the grooved rock, ruins, and foreground rock make, they remind me of an hourglass shape, which I personally think is pleasing. Additionally, I like the way that the ruins are sandwiched between the upper and lower rocks. There's something interesting to me about that as well. I want to iterate that backing the camera up slightly wasn't possible because of the unevenness of the ground for tripod placement, and, more importantly, the alteration in perspective owing to the change in the subject to lens distance. Even if I had included more of a buffer around the perimeter of the film for cropping, I still wouldn't have achieved the look I was able to actually get. Changing lenses and backing up may sound like a good option as well, but then the terrain will force you to change perspective and composition. I didn't even attempt to move the camera farther back because the next closest focal length I own is the Nikon Nikkor 300mm M lens, which would have given me a more compressed view of the scene and not the exaggerated look I was after. If you'd like to learn more about this lens, I'll leave a link to that video in the description as well. In the digital age, it is just about imperceptible that someone could spend an hour making this image. It's just downright funny and ridiculous. The fascinating part is that because I was so engaged with adjusting the camera, the passing of time felt like a few minutes, even though my smartphone told me otherwise. The point being is that being forced to take my time to experiment with camera position, film back orientation, and movements helped me optimize my horizontal composition, even though I initially wasn't so thrilled about what I saw on the ground glass. I believe that I did the best I possibly could with this scene within the limits of my current abilities. And so this photograph takes on a very special meaning to me because it is demonstrative of the fact that the slowness of large format challenges me in a manner that is different from other formats, whether it be film or digital. That's a piece of humble pie that the slowness of large format has served me. Delicious. I think there is another important consideration in this scene about slowness that I've ignored up until this point. Usually, I'm racing against the constant change of light, especially those short-lived colorful moments during sunrise and sunset. Man, that can be stressful if you're not set up ahead of the ensuing explosive sky. For this scene, that challenge of light chasing is basically removed for about 3 to 4 hours. From my understanding, most Pueblo ruins face south to take advantage of solar heating during the winter months. As it turns out, this is great for capitalizing on the advantage of reflected light. At the opposite side of this cliff dwelling is a mountain that bounces beautiful but subtle reflected light back onto the house on fire ruin. It is visibly noticeable, but you do have to pay close attention because it isn't as strong of a light as many photographs will have you believe. That's just the magic of photography and maybe a little Photoshop embellishment. In any case, because the sun keeps the mountain fully bathed in sunlight for hours at a time in the morning, you've got plenty of time to try alternative compositions without the fear of missing the reflected light. So, in this case, the slowness of large format doesn't detract from experiencing what many photographers enjoy about shooting large format cameras. Had the window of opportunity for reflected light been narrower, I would have been forced to accept a less well thought out image, which may not have been as compositionally compelling. For me, it's the pressure of setup time to be ready for the momentary unique light where the slowness of large format photography can get in the way of making images. I enjoy the softness and variety of colors that manifest during sunrise and sunset. It's simply a calming, exciting, and delightful experience. But those colorful moments are very brief, and you have to act quickly. I have learned the hard way that if I'm not on location, have my subject matter picked out, and ready to shoot at least an hour before sunrise or sunset, I exponentially increase the likelihood that I'm not going to get a stellar image and basically will just waste a piece of film if I attempt shooting. As I was preparing my thoughts for this video, I tried to think of any images where I rushed through the setup, just made it in time to have unique lighting bathing the scene, and came away with a compelling image. I couldn't think of any. If I do have any such images, maybe they're stashed away in storage and I've forgotten about them. Not very likely though. What works best for me is being very familiar with the area and being there well in advance of when I want to shoot. It's like the old adage of F8 and be there. Except for the F8 part, that's shooting wide open on all of my 8x10 lenses and generally not the look I'm going for in my landscape photographs. The point being is that large format does force you to be slow, but with some pre-planning, you can make the slowness a non-issue during those brief moments where you need to concentrate on getting your metering spot on and not be feeling the pressure to rush through your setup. But wait, Tony, how do you know if the sky is going to give you the colors you want and that your camera is pointed in the best direction to capture those colors? Yes, indeed. Serendipity says it all. There is no guarantee that if you have clouds in the sky waiting to be bathed in the delightful colors of sunrise or sunset, that they'll glow the way you envision. I've been at locations where I was zealous that the sky was going to explode with color, and it turned out to be a dud. Or that my camera was pointed in the opposite direction of where the clouds were bursting with color. That's just the thrill of the chase for both large format and digital photographers alike. But it does go without saying that with digital, you have the luxury of speed to change the direction your camera is pointing in and nailing the shot. Case in point, Death Valley National Park, November 4th, 2023. My friends Marshall, Jay, and I headed out to Badwater Basin to witness the rare Lake Manly and hopefully come away with some unique shots. Jay and I committed to compositions facing the southerly direction, while Marshall had the free rein over the land because he shoots with the Fujifilm GFX 100S. Marshall was able to come away with these amazing 5 images of different scenes with the same explosive sunset, while Jay and I came away with just one viewpoint. When you shoot large format during sunrise or sunset that includes sky in your scene, you have to be okay with commitment and the possibility that you may not walk away with anything worthwhile. That's the love-frustration relationship I have with large format and that I've talked about before on this channel. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link to it in the description. Speaking of slowness, not only did my house on fire ruin photo take me a long time to set up, I only shot 4 sheets of 8x10 film on that same trip from April 20th to the 25th. That's it. I wanted to shoot other scenes that I've previously scouted, but the conditions weren't right. Whether it be due to the lack of unique lighting, presence of whipping wind, the absence of spring vegetation at the higher elevations, and or the dearth of interesting clouds. I've just learned over the years that if I shoot a scene just because I'm there without any consideration for lighting and conditions, I'm simply wasting my film and money, and I won't ever print the image ridiculously huge. So I practice the slowness of large format by having the self-discipline of keeping my camera in the bag and reserving it for special scenes. In that regard, that is one of the best advantages to the slowness of large format, because I only shoot when I know there is a high likelihood that the image will be a contender for ending up on my family's home as a ridiculously huge print. Thanks, large format, for keeping my landscape portfolio small, but hopefully strong, and one that my family and I can unequivocally enjoy. Do you enjoy the slowness of large format? Tell me how it's affected your photography experience in the comments section. I'd enjoy hearing from you. In case you were wondering, I'll display the other 3 images that I took on my recent trip to southeastern Utah after I slowly get through this video wrap up. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please hit that like button to show your support, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and consider using my Amazon links in the description for items that you already intended to purchase so that we both can continue creating content. As always, thanks for watching.